Hello, já jsem Broňa, nadšený učitel angličtiny z Brna, který pomáhá lidem zamilovat se do angličtiny. No nadšeně vás vítám na, jestli už se nepletu, z začátku 5. BroňaCastu, tedy podcastu o angličtině a Broňovi, nebo spíš angličtině, který připravuje Broňa. Každopádně, dneska mám pro vás další díl, pracovně tomu říkám amerického speciálu, kde jsem si opět povídal se 4 báječnými učiteli z firmy Blabu, americkými učiteli, chtěl bych říct, a povídali jsme si o gramatice. A specificky jsme se bavili o tom, jaký je největší rozdíl mezi britskou a americkou gramatikou, jestli tedy existuje nějaký rozdíl v gramatice. Taky jsme se bavili o tom, v čem studenti nejčastěji chybují, myslím jako my Češi. A pro mě bylo i hodně zajímavé ptát se na to, jestli skutečně Američané používají takové ty věci jako předpřítomný a předminulý čas. Ale samozřejmě jsme si povídali i o spoustě dalších věcí. No jak asi tušíte, tak tenhle podcast je zase celý v angličtině, tak vás čeká, doufám, příjemné procvičování angličtiny a jejího poslechu a taky doufám, že se dozvíte něco zajímavého o gramatice a anglické gramatice. Poslední věc, než to oficiálně tady spustím, povídali jsme si online a tohle je vlastně takový výtah toho záznamu, takže ta zvuková kvalita není úplně uchvatná a moc se za to omlouvám. Ale teď už konečně, pojďme na to.
Hi, my name is Kellen and I am from Fairbanks, Alaska, USA. And my 2 favorite things to do are go outside on adventures and spend time with family.
Again, I don't know if there is something, but is there like a different grammar, let's say in Alaska, something you use? And I will give you an example. I, for example, noticed that, at least in my experience, people in the US don't use past perfect that much. Like, you know, in Britain, people would say, for example, I was tired because I had worked hard or I had been working hard. Mm-hmm. And whereas Americans, at least in my experience, would mostly just say past simple, I was tired because I worked hard. Would you agree with that, or would you say because I had been working hard?
Yeah, I would say that that's true. I would say Americans aren't very familiar with the 12 specific categories of tenses. In school, a lot of the time we don't learn those specific tenses. We just learn past, present, and future. And then when I came here and learned about the 12 different, I was like, where was this when I was going to school? I mean, why didn't we learn about this? So I think with British and American, they are a lot more sticklers about the tenses than Americans. We're just like, it's good enough.
Good, thank you. I think it's nice for the students to hear it.
Yeah.
And is there any like a typical mistake with grammar that you notice Czech people do, or any grammatical problem that we do have?
So grammar in specific, it's because Czech and English grammars are different. Like, já mám hlad, I am hungry. Like, I have hunger. Or, jak se máš? Like, how do you have, like, what do you have, or how is it going? And when Czech people are trying to translate word for word what they're trying to express or they're trying to say, usually it doesn't come out right. Like, she teached me, she learned me. Like, they struggle a lot with the formation of the sentence in the proper tense, grammatically.
Mm-hmm. I understand.
Mostly past tense.
Yes, thank you. And how about Czech grammar? Are you actually trying to learn Czech, or you gave up, or you haven't started yet? Or
So I am learning Czech. The thing that I have to do first is to fill my memory banks full of vocabulary and then learn the grammar, because Czech grammar is so difficult to try to learn because the words change based on the case of the sentence. There's 7 different cases, and for me as a little American where we don't have gender, we don't have cases, and we don't have these weird specific exceptions to the word, I have a hard time with it.
At least it's not boring.
Every day is exciting.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes, my name is Chelsea. I'm from Chicago in the United States, and I am a teacher. I've been teaching English and dance and art for about 10 years.
Now, let's talk about grammar. And this is a hard question because I actually don't know, but is there anything specific about American grammar, maybe in comparison with the British way of saying things? Or I actually don't know, so I'm just trying to find out.
I think I think it goes back to slang again. I think that we talk in such a casual way that if you compare us to British speakers, we just always sound like we're talking to like our best friend, even though it might be a very serious and very proper and business-related conversation. I don't know about so much grammar. I know we have different vocabulary to Brits. I think mostly the structure is pretty much the same, but they just sometimes use words that like a light, like I'm going to a light at the next stop. Or, like we don't say things like that. Like we haven't talked like that since the 1940s or something, So for us, it's just like very archaic to speak so formally all of the time. And we just are really casual speakers. I think that for us, it even is almost like you seem more confident if you can speak to someone as if they're your best friend. You don't show that you're intimidated because Americans love to show confidence all of the time, right? So the more casual you can be in certain situations, the more confident you come across. But I don't think we have so many grammar differences. I think it's mostly just vocabulary and pronunciation.
Good, thank you. And is there any typical mistake as far as the grammar is concerned that you hear from, let's say, Czech students or generally from your students, something that is difficult for them?
Yes, I think we have so many past and present perfect, and the tenses are just always very, very difficult for students to talk about what happened in the past and if it's still going to happen, and if there's still a possibility that it might happen. So that's something that's really hard, is getting students to understand exactly what they're trying to say and convey that. So, if you say, I went to the store, or I'm going to go to the store, you haven't quite been yet, but you still have a plan that you're going to go. So getting students to understand the past tense in all of its infinite possibilities, right? Is it still going to happen? Do you not know if it's going to happen? Do you want it to happen? And trying to help them to convey what they're trying to say. That's something that's always takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Hector. I am from the United States. I was born in the state of Oregon, but I grew up in the state of Georgia, specifically in the city of Atlanta. My hobbies are taking things apart to see how they work and all of the artistic endeavors such as painting and drawing and photography and things of that nature.
Would you say there is something like, I don't know, distinct or unique or different about American grammar? Maybe also in comparison with the British grammar that most people study here at school in Europe?
As far as the grammar, yes. So in British English, it's more common to use the present perfect form of past, right? In American English, it's more typical to use the past simple. Okay, so for example, if you were to ask me about my breakfast this morning, right, I would say, yes, I had breakfast, whereas a British person would probably tell you, I've had breakfast. Okay, and it's just a little bit of a different way of thinking about it. Part of it is because it's a custom that you become accustomed to saying it that way, but then it's also a slightly different way of visualizing it. And I try to teach people a different way. So whether they see it as the way that the present perfect explains it, or if they see it as the way the past simple explains it, then that's what I try to teach people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. And is there any mistake that you can see a lot of your students are making as far as the grammar is concerned? Is something problematic for them? Or?
Yeah, so one of the things it depends on the language where, their mother tongue. But one of the most common things is kind of mixing up the subjects and the verbs. And one of the tips that I try to give people is that the simplest way to think about it is that English almost always is just subject, verb, subject, verb, subject, verb, right? We put a lot of things in between, and it's a matter of learning how those things are structured. But in general, when you're making an idea, it's subject, verb always, right? Unless it's for an interrogation, then it switches, right?
We'll
that's probably the biggest mistake I see.
And can you maybe just give me an example of the sentence that it's wrong so people can imagine how the mistake looks?
Okay, so let me think of one. Okay, so a lot of people, I hear them say, instead of saying, you eat pizza, right? I hear a lot of people just kind of omit the subject where it's like, for example, eat pizza, or eat pizza you, or something like along these lines, right? And I've noticed that there's some people that make this mistake more than others, and I think it has to do more with their mother tongue. Not exactly sure, I couldn't isolate or pinpoint which group of people make this mistake more, but in general, this is something that I see and something that I'm always consistently having to correct.
Thank you.
Of course, my name is Rolanda, and I am from beautiful, sunny Los Angeles, but now I live in beautiful, sunny Madrid, Spain, and I've been here for 6 years, but I'm a Californian at heart.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's go to grammar.
Okay.
Again, the same question. Is there anything unique about American grammar? Maybe when we compare it with British English that most people study in the Czech Republic?
Grammar, English grammar for the most part is simple. That's one of the things that people say. The grammar is easy. It's very straightforward, very structured. It's just the prepositions and the phrasal verbs that are the issue. We do use a lot of slang sometimes, not necessarily in public speaking, but writing and speaking with other people. We use slang words a lot. We create our own words. I think that's probably the most confusing thing that people experience with grammar.
Thank you. Maybe I have one question, because in British English, we use past perfect. Like, I was surprised because I had never seen that before. Is it true that it is not actually used in American English, that people would just say before instead of had seen, had done?
It's not that it's not used. It's not used very much. And I don't really think it's pushed. It's not really emphasized that much. I have got 5 apples. It's like, I have 5 apples. Like, for us, I think the least amount of words you can use, the better. Right.
Thank you. Clear rule. And anything about, again, I don't know if there is anything typical for California about grammar. Is there any maybe structure or something that it's a little unusual?
Not necessarily. Like I said, we tend to pronounce, we enunciate is the correct word. Our words very clearly, but we do tend to use a lot of slang words that don't even make sense. Just words that maybe you heard from a kid, and then it gets repeated and repeated, and it becomes part of the normal vernacular, so to speak. I'm using all these big words. I probably.
Oh, good. Thank you. And we are going to have subtitles very probably. So.
Okay.
Okay. And what would you say is a typical mistake as far as the grammar is concerned when you have lessons or discussions with your students?
The biggest mistake is, and I try to emphasize this, people tend to try to translate, do a direct translation from their language to English, or from English to their language. And that's a huge mistake, because with phrasal verbs, for example, get on, get off, get out, those all have completely different meanings, right? So if you try to translate each word individually, it won't make any sense. And I think that's a huge problem that people try to do, is they try to do a direct translation. and it completely confuses them. So I always try to tell people, try to think in English. Don't try to think in Czech and then translate it. Try to think in English to begin with, and that in turn will help with your...
couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Oh, good. We agree on something.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Tak, to byl další 15. díl BroňaCastu. Já doufám, že se vám líbil. Ty všichni 4 učitelé jsou hrozný sympatiáci a já rád si s nima povídat, tak já doufám, že jste si to taky užili. Mají krásnou angličtinu, musím říct, přestože jsem velký fanoušek britské angličtiny, tak oni jsou fakt jako hrozně milí, hodní a ta angličtina byla skvělá. Jako vždycky budu nadšený, když mi třeba dáte vědět, jestli se vám tahle epizoda líbila, nebo jakou další byste chtěli, co byste BroňaCastu nebo koho chtěli slyšet. Jestli náhodou jste si ještě nestáhli můj nový e-book, tak určitě doporučuji. Jmenuje se to 300 plus tipů pro lepší angličtinu. Je to seznam mých nejlepších, nebo ne mých, je to seznam těch nejlepších věcí, které můžete najít na internetu, jako jsou odkazy, aplikace, webové stránky, knihy, online kurzy, prostě všechny ty věci, které vám můžou pomoct vylepšit si angličtinu. Je to úplně zdarma, stačí, že najdete na broňa.cz, tam kliknete newsletter a tam už ten e-book najdete, můžete si ho zadarma stáhnout. Já jsem s tím kupu práce a tak budu mít velikou radost, když si to stáhne hodně lidí. Ale to není to hlavní, co vám chci říct. Hlavní je, don't forget to stay awesome and dream big. Bye bye.